What's going on, traders, and welcome to this week's episode of the Weekly Watchlist. Before we get going, I'd like to make your attention to the newsletter. If you're interested in receiving 5 to 10 swing trades or just stocks I think will move this week, then head on into the first link in the description, sign up there, and I will send that out to you tonight. Again, that's 5 to 10 swing trade ideas for the week. So without further ado, let's get into the analysis. We have the broad market comprised of SPY, the Qs, and IWM. After that, we're going to jump into some companies. We have Apple, Netflix, Tesla, Alibaba, Facebook, NVDA, Microsoft, and Amazon. So jumping right into our SPY weekly chart, you can see we did form another hammer here, but the upper wick is sort of based on our large gap up on Friday, which we'll talk about on the daily chart. So two hammers in a row. With some interesting, reasons for the wicks and tails. I'm not too sure that I would count on it being like a huge reversal to the upside, although, a hammer is a hammer. And again, I think the highs are a good target on any sort of move to the upside here, just based on the weekly. We would have to break through this resistance zone here at 297.88, which is pretty clear. You can see, boom, rejected, rejected, rejected. That is a very key area. So if we get above that, we're targeting the all-time high up here around 302, just based on the weekly. And if we zoom into the daily, you can see what I was talking about here with the large gap up and sort of weird wick here. So again, getting rejected right at this historic resistance level, 297.88, you can see it a little clearer now. The key is going to be whether or not this gap fills and then reverses to the upside, or if we see a partial gap fill and then some sort of sideways action between 294 and 297.88 here. So I think price could just sort of bounce around in between this key level here, using that as support with the 50 SMA below now, and then resistance up here. I think there's a lot of news-driven movement in the market right now. So, this was a big move up based on news, and then it faded all day, almost back down to the close, just because, the whole news thing wasn't completely resolved. The trade deal, there's a couple phases, yada, yada, yada. We're just trading the chart. Again, does the gap fill? Do we chop around in this range? I think it's certainly possible, and then a big move could come out of some news-driven event. But again, our targets are up here at 302. You can see, boom, resistance, resistance. We are holding well above the 50 SMA as long as we stay above this 294 level. So look for that as support. But if that gives, we do want to see this trend line sort of act as support. Now that we are above it firmly, you could see we got the little poke down there, but 200 SMA should be coinciding with that since we are making more moves to the upside. So that should be a strong support if we ever did get down into it. Qs have a similar picture. However, you can see that the body of the candle is slightly larger, meaning that the bears couldn't push prices quite as low as they did on SPY. We have some confusing trend lines that we're sort of looking at as back tests here. We'll get rid of this one. So you can see we didn't quite come up to our resistance trend line, so I think that's a little resistance is coming in early there based on this. So I think, again, it could just sort of chop sideways, fill the gap a little bit, and then just move in a sideways manner until more news comes out and drives the market one way or another. Again, this is going to be a key support here, 188.61, based on all of our resistance here now that we're above it. Again, 50 SMA is going to start to coincide with that. 200 SMA is moving upwards, so keep that in mind. Any sort of big move to the downside, imagine, it would sort of coincide with 183 if something catastrophic were to happen over the course of the week. Boom, it would sort of meet up with it around this level. So keep that in mind, any sort of move to the downside. And lastly, IWM. Again, the wild card just sort of acting unlike any of our others. We did see a large gap up. The gap was filled. The gap went all the way up to the 200 SMA, resistance and close at the 50 SMA, so sort of all over the place. One thing to note is that it's sort of in the middle or at the bottom middle of the range that it trades in. You can see from here to here. So we're not quite as strong as the Qs or the SPY. So I would wait and see what happens when we get above this trend line. You can see we've had multiple fake breakouts, fake breakout here, fake breakout here, and then back into the range. So I would, again, see if we can get above that 200, and then key would be if we get a real breakout above this resistance trend line and then move back up into this resistance zone, which I mean, just based on all the rejections in the past, I would have to imagine it would sort of run into some sort of resistance there, even a pullback before maybe a fake breakout or something. However, if we go to the downside, you can see key support is down here at 145, just about. If that gives, things are going to get pretty nasty. I think we talked about this in last week's video. The next support below is sort of way down here at 136. So keep that in mind on the downside. There's a lot of room to fall if this support gives. And also keep in mind, if we get above this resistance zone, there's sort of a lot of room to run. So it's the same in both cases. I just don't think that the strength is there to push up and through this in a strong fashion. Alrighty, getting into our companies now, you can see that Apple really followed the market with the gap up, but it did even better. It held the gap. You can see it closed up here near the highs, whereas SPY obviously sold off to the open. We see a new all-time high here in Apple up here at 237.64. This is the previous all-time high at 233.47. You can see that's sort of where the gap started, and then we just cruised right up through it like butter, so that was nice to see. So depending on what the market does, if we see a little bit of a pullback, then Apple might have the a pullback to these two data points we have here, which are Thursday's high, and this would be Monday's high. So that would make a nice gap fill, and then possibly a reversal off of that. However, if it goes through that, we can see our support trend line is certainly still intact. The 50 SMA is going to start to make its way up there as we have had steeper increases in price, steeper gains there, so that should act as a super support somewhere if we did see a pullback into this area. The main thing we have to keep in mind is that we did put in a new higher high. Next thing we need to see is a new higher low to form on the chart. So anything that really forms above 217.15, this set of lows in here, in my opinion, would be that higher set of lows in which the uptrend would still be intact. So this is the key area on the chart that we do need to maintain above. If the uptrend continues, if it gives, then again, everything's mapped out for us. We have 211.50, 203.32. After that, the downtrend or the uptrend is sort of lost, and we would be, back in sideways chop. So keep those areas in mind. So Netflix has had a nice sort of retest of this area in here, but you can see it's running into resistance right around the sort of major break point right here around 282. Also, the 50 SMA is acting as resistance, as you can see from Friday's session. So we're sort of at a key point here on the chart. I think this resistance zone will offer some sideways movement in the stock, and we won't see a real strong push through this. I think sideways action is sort of in store, a little consolidation after this big move. So even if it just bobbles around sideways, I still think that the bears are sort of in control here on Netflix. Again, fundamentally, company I don't favor. However, just playing the chart, if we do see a move and a break through that 50 SMA, we're looking at 325 cents as a major resistance. 1, 2, 3 touches here on the chart. That would probably be a good short, I would imagine, if we got up there fast. So if it went boom on Monday, came right up, I would short it there, watch for a pullback back maybe into this 282 level. But anyways, after that, our next resistance zone is 310 to 316. That should offer some strong resistance as well. Prices could never really make higher or get out of the downtrend from this area. So resistance is mapped out, support's below us. I'd say this is pretty nice support. You can see resistance here, and then boom, it acted as support on the little back test here. So 268.12, certainly a strong support. If we get down into 252.30, should act as support again on any sort of first touch into that area. After that, we're looking at 231.58. So Tesla has essentially just gone sideways, although this week was an up week. You can see we're getting some resistance based on this inverted hammer here, right? In line with all of our other resistance. So no surprise there at 247.82. 200 SMA rather is starting to come down on us, so that'll offer even more pressure to push prices down. I think on any sort of pullback, we should see this act as support here at 239, just based on some of these tails here. Even it's a little support down there. So there. If that gives 50 SMA, and our next one down here at 229.69, and then so on and so forth down to 219.42 and 211.36. So sort of just going sideways overall. You can see we're not making real progress in the upwards direction. It'll be real key this week to see if we can break through this resistance point here at 247.82 and go on up to our next one up here, or we just again continue the sideways trend and sort of just bobble around in this area. So BABA again responding nicely to the news on Friday, getting above our major averages here, which is good to see. They offered support on this little back, you can see the small lower wick there. Offered some support. Prices continued and closed sort of near the highs, not at highs, but near. So I'd say the next move here is up on BABA, just based on the candle and staying above those major moving averages. Maybe a small back test to the wick of Thursday, but not much. I wouldn't let it get past sort of this support zone here at 167.93 if you were to take it long around this area. Maybe I guess you could see a pullback into here, but I would want to see it maintain above the moving averages to be sure that we are going to make a nice move to the upside. However, again, I could see it just sort of going sideways with the rest of the market in between this range it's sort of stuck in, boom and boom. If it moves on up to our highs around here, around 183.91, you can see we'll draw that level in. Again, that's a good short just based on the symmetrical triangle that it's in. Doesn't have much room to run unless it were to break out, which I don't think it has. It's not quite ready, in my opinion, just based on where it's positioned in the symmetrical triangle. So keep that in mind on the upside. Again, we covered the downside, and again, the rising support trend line based on the symmetrical triangle should certainly act as support should these areas fail. Facebook having a nice day on Friday, maintaining slightly above the 50 SMA there. However, you can see resistance coming in from our 187 sort of area on our chart. Boom, 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 sort of offering some pressure to the downside there. So the key for this week is going to be whether or not we maintain above that 50 SMA, the blue line there, in which case I would say if we can break above 187.34, our next test would obviously be 190.120. Anything after that is going to sort of be a back test of this support trend line that you're now below, so resistance. Any sort of pullback here would make a nice cup and handle. So we have a cup, a handle would form, maybe a pullback into 190 or 179 rather, 62. I could certainly see that. So if we see some support here, maybe the next move is up again. Nice higher low forming from our set here. So keep that in mind. If things get catastrophic, obviously we want to see that 200 SMA and some of these levels from, boom, boom, start to offer some support on the downside. So 176.68 and 172.99 are sort of our last ditch efforts there. NVDA, seeing some resistance, no surprise, at a resistance level. So we have an inverted hammer. This to me would imply, like the market, maybe it wants to see a pullback and full gap fill here to Thursday's high. That level is right around 185, we'll call it. So a pullback here certainly looks like it could happen based on our candle. If we see any sort of push up through this and, a big move to the upside, we're looking at 192.95 as our first resistance. Anything after that sort of puts us in a anything after that sort of puts us back into some of these areas up from, way back here almost a year ago now. So we'll just draw in 206 as a reminder as anything major above. But below us, again, we have our 173.47, this sort of chop area that should act as support and any sort of move back into it. We do want to see prices move higher and put on a new higher high so that way we can see an uptrend start to form, or continue to form rather. But 50 SMA will start to coincide with this level, so that should be key on any sort of big move to the downside. We don't really want to see any sort of backtest of this resistance since that already happened here, and it would be putting in a lower low, not a higher low, which would sort of get rid of our trend. If we were to start one here, it would essentially just mean sideways action, which is no good. So keep that in mind. Alrighty, and we have Microsoft again. So we did get back above our trend line, but we have an inverted hammer here right around resistance. So wouldn't be surprising to just see it do some more sideways action and continue this sort of chop and go sideways, like I said. I think based on the candle, we see a pullback into the 50 SMA, sort of go sideways around this area. I'm not hopeful of a huge move to the upside now based on the candle and what the market has to do overall. So something like that is a little less steep, obviously, than this major one here. So any sort of maintenance above this would continue the uptrend, if you will, in my opinion. Higher set of lows. Next thing we really need to see is a new higher high. So again, it's on Microsoft to put in a new all-time high, in which case we're playing whole and half dollars. Pullback, we sort of covered 50 SMA and this support trend line. And last but certainly not least, we have Amazon. This is a beautiful short point here on Friday. If you were watching and you saw that we weren't getting any traction to move up and above our 1751 level, it was a nice short to put things back, below. It's a key level that we were paying attention to. Any sort of retest of that, boom, it happened here too. If you shorted it there, got a nice pullback. Again, you could short it here, get a nice pullback. So I think we're sort of, based on the chart, staying below this level for now. I want to see the move all the way down to 1672. This tail didn't really do it for me. I want to see the move all the way to it, in which case, if that gives, again, we're looking at 1585 on anything lower than that. So that's quite a ways. So, that's $200 away. So quite a bit of wiggle room there on Amazon to the downside. If we get back into this sort of chop zone, again, moving averages, key resistance, sort of smack in the middle of the range as well. So I think we stay in the lower half and just sort of chop around. I don't think there's any real traction above 1833. So if we get up here, that would be a nice short as well to see a pullback. And then, you'd have to play it by ear if it did get above, in which case I would look for some, the fake break again and see some resistance in here at 1851.56. We'll just draw that in just to have it in mind if it ever does get back up there. So that's going to wrap up this week's episode of the Weekly Watchlist. If you enjoyed, let me know down below in the comments section. Leave the video a thumbs up. If you want to see me review any stocks, again for the trending stock analysis, if you want that to return, you got to leave me some comments down below. Subscribe to see more of this content. And remember, if you're interested in receiving 5 to 10 swing trade ideas for the week, sign up for the newsletter. It's completely free, no risk to you. Maybe 5 minutes of your time, but that's about it. So I wish you a green trading week.